self-appointed government watchdog Darrell Issa will apparently now have to find a new tree to bark up at, because recent IRS documents obtained and published by ThinkProgress in response to a Freedom of Information request that debunk Issa's claim that conservative and Tea Party groups were unfairly targeted by the Obama administration. So I'm going to read a little bit from the ThinkProgress article, and they state that, quote, these documents show that the BOLO, or Be on the Lookout keyword lists, distributed to staff reviewing applications between August 12th of 2010 and April 19th of 2013 included more explicit references to progressive groups, ACORN successors, and medical marijuana organizations than to Tea Party entities. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, ACORN, of course, was shut down despite having no evidence of actual wrongdoing. The article continues. Explicit references to Tea Party included in the emerging issues section of the list began in August 2010, but stopped appearing after the May 10th, 2011 lists. From that point on, the list instructed agents to flag all political advocacy groups. The documents instructed the agents to forward, quote, any organization involved with political lobbying or advocacy applying for 501c3 and C4 status to be forwarded for additional review. So really the reason conservatives were really bitching about this review process is because groups under both categories are limited in the amount of lobbying and political activity each can undertake. Now, my take on this is that if Issa was really a government watchdog, wouldn't he be also concerned with progressive groups being flagged alongside with Tea Party groups? Since, of course, they were the ones most unfairly targeted by this, more so than just Tea Party groups. But nope. Darrell Issa shows that he's nothing more than a partisan hack looking out for his rich donor friends that, of course, use these groups to give him legal bribes in the form of campaign contributions, and they also do attack ads against his political enemies. For me, that's what this is all about. I think it's all political games, and there are documents to prove it. Now, personally, I don't think any of these groups should exist. Progressive, Tea Party, marijuana, etc., because they're all trying to lobby to buy the government. While I agree strongly with some of the goals of the progressive and pro-marijuana legalization groups, I think the existence of these social welfare groups, as designated by Citizens United, subvert actual democracy, and is further proof that we are, of course, an oligarchy, and we only look out for the rich. Thoughts, guys?
Yeah, since I've got the chart up here, I'll just jump in first. So here's the breakdown that you see on my screen right now. And this graph was kind enough to even color code them for us so we can compare blue versus red versus neutral groups that the IRS investigated. You'll see not only are the progressive groups investigated more, but they're the top three. So there's only two major groups that would be considered quote-unquote conservative, the Tea Party mentions, and then groups interested on paying off the national debt. Then the other big ones are, progressive causes, ACORN successors. So these are groups with a direct lineage to ACORN, which was shut down over a complete nonsense scandal as well. And then there's one I do want to, give full disclosure on. I feel like medical marijuana, although I guess in the mainstream is considered a progressive cause, there are certainly libertarians and people, on the far right that are all for it. So I don't. I think that one's really more of a purple issue than a blue issue, but I get where the author of this graph is going with it. Mainstream-wise, it's a progressive issue. The only other thing I want to add is just to really, really come down on what Jeff has said as well. Like, I don't care which side these groups go on. Why are political, expressly, blatantly political organizations, left or right, allowed to not only basically operate as charities, but to keep their donors private? It's ridiculous. We should be outraged, not that the IRS targeted the Tea Party or didn't target the Tea Party, not that they targeted progressives, but that they even have to do this job at all. This is a classification of an organization that should not exist. These groups should be illegal. I don't care if I agree with what they have to say or not. Democracy does not work that way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Jordan's just said, and I have kind of two other extra points. First one is that it's another story where I feel a bit sorry for the Republicans in a way, because all of their scandals and all of their talking points are being ripped out from underneath them. They've just got no leg to stand on. Benghazi's been completely debunked and disproven. Now this IRS scandal, which isn't a scandal, the chart clearly shows, that's been pulled away from them. So they've got nothing to talk about. And going into the 2016 election, they were thinking that all of these things were going to stick to, Hillary and the Democratic Party and all of that. And there's nothing to stick. There's nothing there. And the second point is that, okay, Fox News is still probably going to try and talk about this article, or this scandal rather, no matter what. But the rest of the media, they need to be covering this and just say, look, no matter what you've heard about the IRS targeting political groups, yeah, they have targeted political groups, but they're not targeting the right-wing groups, as you've probably heard on other news channels. They've been targeting liberal and progressive groups. And it's just not being covered in the media, and it's just so frustrating. And it's probably really frustrating for the progressive groups that have been targeted, saying, why aren't kind of we being kind of helped out? Why aren't the progressive media trying to demonize the IRS in that aspect? It's just another really kind of sad story of the media not doing their job.
All right, Daniel, jump in.
Well, for one, I think Fox News is trying and appeal more towards the libertarian base, and I think that's why they're particularly pointing out that the claims that the IRS is targeting Tea Party groups and Tea Party organizations. But it is a fact that we need to start questioning why the hell do we have these large super PACs, and the other thing we need to start asking is, do we really want to give the IRS such great amounts of authority over our taxation?
All right, Sean, what do you think?
Okay, so like when I read this article, it seemed kind of like, yes, technically they targeted more progressive groups over a set period of time than liberal groups, but for the time that they were talking about, the in that time in 2010 when the midterm elections were coming around, they were specifically or more targeting the Tea Party groups for just that like brief, I think it was 8 or 9 months or whatever amount of time. And in an election year, that looks bad. That being said, like, if you're going to sort through political groups and there are more conservative groups out there, then the raw numbers would indicate that that's who you go after. It seems just kind of like if there was a scandal, and I feel like I know how they're going to spin it, they're going to say, well, after they try to head off the election, they then came around again and targeted the progressive groups. But that kind of doesn't hold water when you look at before that they were targeting like ACORN and all that. So I'm not like crazy about the IRS scandal. I hate the IRS, but I'm not like, oh my god, this is like the biggest scandal in history. But I could see how the Issas of the world are going to work around this.
Already. Oh, yeah. If you think Darrell Issa is just going to let, something just as pitiful as facts get in his way of another witch hunt, you must be crazy. Or you must be a conservative Republican in office or running for office, because this is the stuff that they run on, because they don't have any ideas. And I know I'm getting sort of off topic, but these sort of phony scandals, which, once again, I don't agree with the IRS targeting any of these groups, because none of these groups should exist in the first place to be targeted, to be fair. But once again, going back to the Republican angle, I don't think that I don't think that these should exist, but also the Republicans are going to keep coming up with new scandals to try and divert attention from the fact that they have zero ideas, no policy proposals, because they're obstruction. And that's their prerogative right now, is just to obstruct everything that a Democratic president will do, and that's it. There's no other plans than actually how to make people's lives better or make the country better or anything like that.
Well, I mean, with this scandal being hyped up by predominantly Fox News and right-wing talk radio, I've seen so many tweets on it, kind of from the conservative base saying, "Oh, abolish the IRS. They're awful. We should just completely get rid of them because of this scandal." And it's like, you guys are saying that the IRS shouldn't have been targeting these groups. It's their job to target these groups. Admittedly, they shouldn't have to be doing this aspect of their job, because these groups shouldn't exist in the first place, and that's a completely fair point. But because they do exist, it it's the IRS's job to check them out and make sure there isn't any wrongdoing going on. I don't have any problem whatsoever. And as Sean pointed out, if there happens to be, I don't know the exact numbers, but if there happens to be more conservative groups in this area that they're going to be investigating, then of course they're going to investigate more conservative groups. So I just don't. There is no scandal here, and I can't believe that it's been hyped up and that the media, excluding Fox News, that the rest of the media has allowed this to continue, and they haven't tried to quash it.
The media here is terrified of Fox News. They will not challenge them. But I'm glad that you chimed in and said that, Stephen, because you said it much more politely than I would have. But to Danny's point, are we comfortable with the IRS having this much power? Do we want the IRS investigating tax fraud? Yes! That's why they exist. Of course I want them investigating tax fraud. That's a ridiculous point. But you said that much nicer.
I want the IRS abolished. I actually agree with those tweets. And what doesn't help the case is because there's enough here that you could report on it, like not like CNN reporting on the plane, but you could report on updates of the story because you have the head of the IRS taking the Fifth Amendment, which by the way would be nice on my 1040 form if I could take the Fifth Amendment, but that's a whole other issue. But so you have the head of the IRS taking the Fifth Amendment. Like you have some like little things here, but overall the IRS is a criminal organization with a 64,000-page tax code that nobody understands.
Are you really calling them criminals?
Yes.
Yes.
They have a 64,000-page tax code that nobody understands, and it invites selective enforcement. And in my opinion, selective enforcement is criminal. Whether or not this particular story is a scandal is completely different.
Do you know why the tax code is so long?
Because of you.
It's because of corporations and wealthy individuals writing loopholes for themselves.
Exactly. This is like trying to blame the cops for arresting people. This is like trying to blame the cops for arresting people. The cops don't make the laws; they just enforce them. And it's the same with the IRS.
The IRS has to, because the code is so massive. The IRS has to enforce it selectively. So. Has there been?
They didn't not make the massive code.
Yeah, they do write some regulations because whether or not this is the IRS, this particular case is the IRS targeting people in an improper way. Like you can't argue that this hasn't happened in the past. George Bush did this to anti-war churches. Every president has like their own little IRS like area where they use them against somebody. I mean, even Michael Moore complains about being audited every year.
All right, Daniel.
If I'm correct, before the Tea Party, wasn't the tax liberty movement targeted by the IRS?
Okay, and the tax liberty movement was... give us a little context.
Pretty much, they're basically a group of people who believed that the income tax was illegitimate and basically talked about how the Supreme Court declared that the 16th Amendment would have no new taxes. It was basically a Tea Party before the Tea Party, pretty much.
No, hold on. Okay, so I don't know if they were targeted by the IRS, but again, and I'm sorry if this comes off as rude, but if a group exists on the premise that we shouldn't have to pay our taxes, then it makes absolute perfect sense that the IRS looks in to see if they're paying their taxes. That's not persecution. That
sort of makes sense. I'm going to agree with Jordan on this one. That makes all the sense in the world.
And look, could the tax code, could all those those pages and pages, different tax codes and loopholes and so, could that be simplified? Yes, of course it could. But the politicians, the corporations, the rich people have influenced it to make it that large, and it's the IRS's job to check it out. And because they don't have the resources to check every single rule that's there, they have to selectively choose it. They've had their hands tied. They have to choose something. And in this case, they're going to target the people who are saying, we don't want to pay our taxes. It makes, as John just said, it makes perfect, logical and reasonable sense to target those groups.
Mm. And I think the final point that I want to make here is that if you don't want a tax code that is so filled with so many corporate loopholes and loopholes for the wealthy and everything like that, we have to get money out of politics. And then we can go and actually elect politicians that will take some of those loopholes out, and that will simplify the tax code a lot. So
and just to speak in defense of our two libertarians on the panel here, I think it's a horrible solution, but the flat tax type scenarios that they would endorse are certainly a more simplified tax code. So we can all agree that we're pro simplified tax code, but you don't fault the IRS for making sure people aren't committing tax fraud. That's not the answer.
And I can be very sympathetic to those who see the tax code because it is massive and it is a problem. I can see how certain people could be appealed, or could see a flat tax as appealing. Now, flat taxes are ultimately regressive and will hurt the poor more than anything, right? But if you're a middle-class person and you're like, I'm sick of this giant-ass tax code, I want a simple tax, well, that would work out well for you, but it won't work out for everyone else unless you're, wealthy and middle-class.
I mean,
so that's the thing to remember.
You could have different rates to balance it out, but it would be like
that would be a progressive. Guess what that is?
Yeah,
if you have different rates, it's a progressive tax system, which is what we're supposed to have.
Well, actually, not necessarily, because if you have higher rates for the poor, it would be more. It would be
a regressive tax system.
What I'm saying is, if you said that you were going to have two or three rates, and you were going to have it tilted more toward the rich, but it would be flat, like what you pay based on that, and you don't have to fill out a 1040 form with the fear of God that the IRS is going to audit you, then I would definitely be up for that.